So let me get started. Once again, I wanted to say I'm Carol Crawford, and I introduced myself as, what I'm currently doing with Rosen. I was a classroom teacher and a district administrator. I was a liaison to help teachers integrate technology into their classrooms. And then from there, I met a lot of folks in the educational technology market and in this field, and began to sell for, I was sort of recruited away as a salesperson. I did sell for a while, and I had a territory with Virginia and California when I lived out there, and that was fun. And then after a while realized I'm really a teacher at heart, and went back to what really drives me, which is making sure that I'm assisting either kids to read or teachers to help kids to read. So I'm happy to be at Rosen, and I'm excited to share with you LevelUp, especially the phonics part of it. I'm seeing, as I'm sure you are too, sort of a swing back to not a complete disregard for whole language, but a healthy mix, and which I think good teachers have always sort of done, and maybe with a little more attention on the science of reading and the research behind using phonics in a systematic and explicit way to teach those phonics is really being highlighted now and is really getting a lot of attention. And we're excited because we have that as part of LevelUp, and I'll be happy to show that to you and take your questions on it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and start. If you have questions for me as we move through this, feel free to type those into chat. I do have the link here at the bottom. This comes from obviously the ILA. And this is their position statement for 2020, which I think is really interesting. They sort of do this every now and then, and you'll notice this is very straightforward this year about, really saying specifically that alphabet and vocabulary knowledge, decoding, it's highlighted. And I really like, they always talk about their purposeful and efficient, their vote for, if you will, or their endorsement of purposeful and efficient and developmentally appropriate instruction and phonological awareness. But obviously, I think important to note the decoding and combining alphabetic principles with that phoneme awareness. Oh, and acquiring phoneme awareness is my next bullet, which I think is, this is, you can't get more specific than this. So they're saying definitely phonics, right? And this emphasis on that acquisition earlier, which is really, something I think good teachers know. We have kids who come to school, we're all well aware of the huge discrepancy that we see in students who are read to at home, and when they start school, what that vocabulary looks like. Just the word count alone is, we've all probably seen that research, and it's a big, they come to school with a very big space that they have to make up if they haven't been read to, or they haven't learned the ABCs, or they haven't started those kinds of pre-reading sorts of skills, or reading readiness skills at home. So we all kind of know that. So this is especially important for these children who come to us that are at risk. And, I think the thing about phonics, it's really, there's no debate, because whether you are explicitly and systematically teaching phonics, or you're teaching it in another way, woven in through whole language or Lucy Hawkins, or whatever your method is, it's important to remember that, you know, I don't think really any of us can get that far away from phonics because it's not debatable. The research is very, very clear about the way we know that reading is acquired by children or adults. We all learn to read, and we start with that sound recognition. This is interesting. Obviously, this is from 2001. And between then and now, we've had, you know, the pendulum sort of swinging back the other way, but systematic phonics integrated into reading instruction is more effective than teaching phonics in isolation. So also important here. So it's not just about explicit and systematic, but also about it being integrated into reading instruction, which is a little bit hard to do as a teacher because it's difficult, especially if you're using centers, which most folks are with young kids, to keep it moving and make sure you're differentiating. And also, you can't have kids on the computer but so long when they're that young. Screen time has to be limited. And then the other piece of it really is most programs do not have both phonics and authentic literature in both fiction and nonfiction available. And that's the really important part, and I think the really strong part about LevelUp. So I think you'll agree as you see this. So this, I don't like to read to well-read adults, but these are the outcomes we're going to work toward today. We're going to make sure that we look at sort of that, not just teaching the phonics, but also directly teaching phonics and also the independent practice of phonics skills, phonemes from emergent sound letter recognition or correspondence to multisyllabic words and compound words. So we need to be able to span that, which you'll see that is one of the things we're really proud of is there's 110 books, and each of them have 3 activities that appeal to children who are kinesthetic or, you know, audio learners. So you have embedded audio, you have ways to practice actually forming the letters with either the mouse or your finger if you're using a touch screen. And so you do have that integration to practice right there on within the program. Consider what the right classroom resources are and activities that impact your students' reading growth. And you know that. You know what is happening in your school district or classroom. And so you know where the needs are. It's always important, you know, sometimes we find that decision makers select specific pieces of, let's just call them resources for teachers to use, and teachers say, I don't have time. But the truth is, if you look at your test scores, and I'm not talking, I know that, you know, we're talking about phonics here, and we're talking probably about kindergarten, first and second grade students, and standardized testing in most states, and I'm guessing for our international folks as well, doesn't start there. I mean, you might do the DIBELS, you might do the DRA, you have different CBMs that you may implement. But the truth is, standardized testing starts later. However, you cannot begin to prepare students for that in 3rd grade. So when you're sometimes when you're selecting, or when decision makers select additional resources, we get a little pushback, and not specifically Rose, and this is something I've seen regardless of the company or the resource. The teachers will say, you know, I've got too much on my plate. And I was a teacher for 18 years, like I said, so I can totally sympathize. But you do have to, especially as a reading teacher, look at, is everything you're doing effective? And it's a really easy yardstick, because if you look at 3rd grade, if kids are in your district are getting to 3rd grade and they are not doing well in the ELA portion of standardized testing, something you're doing to set that foundation needs to be tweaked a little bit. And of course, a lot of it has to do with, you know, you're not controlling every bit of data, every bit of noise in that data. and everything that's happening. And kids come to school with, you know, a lot of them have fought battles before they get on the school bus that you and I can't even imagine. But the truth of the matter is, you know, our job, and I say our because we partner with the schools who implement our product, you know, your success is our success. So our job is to make sure that we're preparing them for that. And we have only so much control over what happens in first and second grade and all of that. We're in our little classroom a lot of the time doing the best we can with what we've got. But the truth is, when I always think when people say I don't have time to implement anything else, what are you doing that maybe could be either supplemented or changed, because something that's happening likely isn't working. So just think of it in that way. Maybe you need more direct phonics practice independently, blended in with your teaching, or maybe you need that scope and sequence to be sure that you know, because you've got kids that are moving ahead and kids that aren't ready and kids that are on track, and to get all those groups moving effectively in the same direction. One thing you don't do when you're losing a race is slow down. So when you have students who are struggling, you don't slow the pace of your teaching. You keep that pace the same. But what you do is you offer those additional supports. And that's where I think you'll find LevelUp and the phonics portion of it will be very helpful. Also, we'll talk a little, and that's kind of my song and dance about monitoring effective progress monitoring, and then being able to apply effective differentiation based on that data. And then, of course, making the materials available. And what I'll find as you work to create a culture of literacy, therefore, you know, kids are seeking out books, or they're looking at reading for as a pleasureful activity to choose to do, or motivating that, and you're modeling reading and writing and giving them lots of rich experiences with that. I think you will find that not only are you going to see the online piece of this, but the supplemental, the printables, the books are all printable. There are not the phonics books, but the material, the supplemental materials are printable, and the books themselves. So once we have learned and we want to practice, you know, reading in authentic text and take that new skill on the road, if you will, the books are right there as well for teachers to assign. So I think if we look at it in that way, I think these are kind of the outcomes that we can get to today. So again, this is, you know, probably information that you know, but I think it's important because a lot of the teachers that are in classrooms today have learned really the specifics of teaching phonics from colleagues, because if you think back not that far, you'll know that, you know, a lot of the schools of education were teaching whole language and teaching teachers to teach through whole language. So it is nice. I've had a lot of appreciation for our scope and sequence. It gives you, it's simple, it's not overwhelming, but it does come, LevelUp does come with a full scope and sequence. And it's not miscellaneous. It's kind of just like this, where you're having specific, you know, explicitly in the right order that research tells us, the way to go from easy to complex, review and repetition, all of those good things that research tells us are built into our program. And then explicitly looking at CVC words, explicitly practicing those, you know, in authentic text. So we didn't write this text for phonics. We found explicit text that we publish that, we found texts that we publish that allow for that explicit teaching to be practiced, those skills that were explicitly taught to be practiced. And it's not about guessing. That we do have predictive books, but we also have decodable books. And so very important for teachers to be able to have that rich variety of texts. And texts on every topic you can imagine. So I'm curious, and you don't have to answer this into chat, but just think through it. Does your school or district mandate explicit phonics instruction, or is that really up to the individual class, school or teacher to do? And some of you have registered your at organizations that assist with schools that implement these kinds of programs. So you're not necessarily a director of literacy for a district, but you work with an organization that helps various schools and districts. So just think about all the, across those schools and districts, is phonics mandated? And I do think that we're going to see more and more, even in charter schools, where it is mandated, because again, the research is very clear. And also, I think you're going to find folks looking for resources like this with scopes and sequences, rich, literature to practice in and all that, all in one place as we move more toward that. So you're really in LevelUp getting two programs in one, because you do have the phonics and you also have the books. I think this is really important about it being in isolation, but also being in the context of reading and writing. So I always looked at, I used to be a project manager, and I looked across the school at what else was there and finding ways to make sure that we were integrating together. It's not just integrating our product into your school, but also integrating with what other pieces of software and other resources and materials are being used. I think that's very important to help teachers because time is limited. So our PD is not just about using the program, but it's using the program in the context of the classroom or the grade level or the school or the district that you are working with. And as we do that, I always look at phonics practice as, where does the key go? Where is the gas pedal? Where are the door locks? Where are the lights on a car? And maybe even going as far as practicing pulling that car forward and back in the driveway. But reading in context, really decoding and looking at even predictive books, being able to take those new phonics skills and apply those into the context of a real life situation with authentic fiction and nonfiction is where real learning takes place, the application. So again, this is just sort of repeating it in, I'm kind of said it in my own words, but this is, I think, concise and gives you sort of that summary of that concept. And I love this, that combination. Kids need both, teacher-led and independent, and practice, and that application into authentic text. And like all good teaching, one size never fits all, right? And I'm going to give you time to read this on your own. So I'm going to talk a little bit about assessment as we get into the product, but I do want to make sure that you do know that progress monitoring is built into LevelUp. So again, for the sake of time, I want you to sort of think through this. We aren't obviously going to have a discussion about it right now, but progress monitoring is, we cannot take that out or think that it has it's not as important as the way we're teaching. So the way we're presenting, the practice that we're giving for the concepts that we teach, But equally important is monitoring that progress and monitoring it often so that we know who's getting it and who's not, so that we can reteach, reinforce, and review when it's the right time to do that. And you will find, once again, of course, that's built into LevelUp. There's a baseline, what we call the initial. Even for non-readers, they can guess. Then once they get in, they begin to learn the phonics and practice what's set there for phonics, as well as having audio support, so being able to pretend read, and then also, you know, hearing it, seeing it modeled, hearing it modeled, and then turning the audio off and beginning to decode and read themselves. One of the things that's coming is a carousel. We call them carousels. It's not unlike Netflix where you scroll left to right. And we are adding, I believe this summer, but I do know it's coming, a carousel of decodable books that will not have audio. And so the purpose for that is really a straight shot from the phonics books to assign kids to begin using those decoding skills immediately without audio support. Then they can go back to a book that has that audio support as they begin to move into fluency, vocabulary building, and higher levels of comprehension. Okay. And then the love of reading. I do think we have a lot of adults today that don't like to read for the exact same reason that a lot of kids don't like to read. They haven't found the right book yet, and they haven't been given the book that's at the right Lexile level. When I mentioned progress monitoring, I didn't mention, but I will now, that we have a partnership with Metametrics that allows all of our books to have a Lexile level. And then when we do that initial, we are able to get a Lexile level, even if it's beginning reading 650. We still know that kids are pre-readers, or if they're emergent readers. And then we can match, the system does the match for us, makes recommendations specifically based on that student's Lexile level, in that range that is 50 above and 100 below Lexile level, so that the texts are challenging but not so challenging that they are frustrating children. And so that is a critical part of promoting the love of reading. When you give a child a book that is outside of that reading range, and if you don't know what that reading range is, it's very difficult to avoid that. But when you do, you might as well give them the book upside down or give it to them in German, because they cannot read it, right? So you're really not fostering a love of reading when you're giving children books that are outside of that. And these are just some quick pictures, and then I'll go into a couple of other details, and I'll actually sign in as both a student and a teacher so that you can see it. The scope and sequence, which I mentioned, you can see over here to the side the units, and they follow they follow the scope and sequence that we've set out. There's 10 different units you can see, starting with upper and lowercase letters, going all the way up to multisyllabic words. And in between, you see where we have initial consonants, beginning sounds, final sounds, the blends, digraphs, etc., CVC words, and then, of course, everything in between. And then you see that it goes all the way up to where you need to be in second grade. Every 2 weeks, if students have read 2 hours or 5 books within their Lexile range, then they will automatically be generated a little test. And this is either, if they're reading below a 200 Lexile level, it's a testlet, which is multiple choice. It's about it's about 5 to 6 questions. A teacher can not turn these off and on. This is part of the system. The teacher has no control over this. It's just about having kids, making sure you're giving kids the opportunity to read the right books, and also to read that amount of time in 2 weeks. And then if you're reading above a 200 Lexile level, You have closed passage assessments, and again, you have about 4 or 5 closed passages within there where the student is answering. That changes the Lexile level depending upon how the child does. And like any data, it's not going to be valid and reliable until you've gathered enough of it. I like to say at least 7 or 8 different progress monitoring, either, counting the initial and the benchmarks. After they've taken about that many, you should have a good feel for where they are. If you've told them, take your time, do your best, and don't have parents or big brother and sister help you. This is just an example of realistically very little reading, but if kids are pre-readers, they would guess here. And if they don't know even beginning and ending sounds, they're probably going to get it wrong. And that's okay. It's fine to start on a very low BR level for Lexile and then move up as you're working through the lessons and reading. The student immediately finds out what their Lexile is. And again, just back to phonics, they have the opportunity to practice, not just in the books, but in the phonics books themselves, there are those activities. So you have the kinds of things that you're probably doing offline, which can continue. But you also now have that independent practice where they don't need you and they get immediate feedback when they get it wrong or right, which I'll demonstrate for you. Also kinesthetic, like I mentioned, you have that multisensory. Students can use the mouse, they can use their finger. We used to use the air or spaghetti or M&Ms. You can, I'm sure in your classrooms you see letter formation as we're learning what the letters and sounds are that correspond. You have that online now where kids can independently practice it as well. And then those decodable readers that I mentioned where students are able to go in and practice. Also the teacher resources, and with this I love the fact that you can actually print out the book. If you're teaching the letter R, you can have kids in their printed books and you can print a full page, half page, or mini books. If you're doing the mini ones, the assembly directions are here. They can be folded. Kids can, take your red crayon and circle all the words that start with R. If that's the letter we're just learning, there's a lot of different activities we can do there, including stickers, sticky notes, and annotation in that way, even for beginning or emergent readers. The teacher resources, you'll see these happen to be, they're aligned to whatever book I happen to open there. It looks like I was looking at the class surprise. So there's a lesson plan. There's a lesson plan in Spanish. You can see the various graphic organizers and other teacher materials that are here in both Spanish and English. So depending on the book, when you're in as a teacher and you're previewing, you're able to see, and I'll show you how you get to that and what's there. Again, the printable books, my personal favorite, where you can print them out in PDF and fold those and make books, which is really helpful for students that don't have a large library either in the classroom or at home. All right, so I'm going to stop there and just go in. I'd like to just show you the program itself. So I'm going to go in first as a student. So when I log in, you'll see that the navigation is very, very simple. There's not a lot of buttons and bells to confuse me or to distract me. I have my bookshelf. And if I scroll down, you'll see the books that I have started. And again, this is how I control that carousel. I have assigned books. You can see my teacher is teaching the silent E that makes the long vowel. And so again, here we have a book where I'm practicing that skill that I'm learning in authentic text. I have a whole carousel, again, of phonics books, and these are in order, in the order that they're suggested to be taught in the scope and sequence. because I'm reading about certain topics, the algorithm behind the software takes what my reading level is currently and what I seem interested in based on the books I'm selecting to read, and suggests for me additional books and puts books in carousels so that I know if I'm interested today about reading about family and friends, I can find a book very easily on that, or daily life, whatever. On my, and again, what's important here is this is on my Lexile level. So let me start, let me go up here and just show you one of the phonics books. Start with over here. And I'm going to let it play.
The letter R. This is the letter R. It makes the sound R. This is an uppercase R. 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 This is a lowercase R. 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 Let's write the letter R. Follow the arrow to trace the uppercase R.
Okay, so I'm seeing it visually. If I have a touch screen, I can do this with my finger. If I don't, I can do it with the mouse. And our students today it's not foreign for them to use the mouse. And it's the same way we used to do it in the air. So you're getting that kinesthetic feel. All right, I'm going to go move just ahead. So
this is the letter R. Let's practice reading some words that begin with the letter R. R. When we put the letter R, R, with at, we get rat. When we put the letter R, with ug, we get rug. When we put the letter R, with O's, we get rose. When we put the letter R, with un, we get run.
So Jill has a question about writing fluency and about picking up your pencil when you're writing. And for the letter R, that's not how we do it, because we start at the top and go back to the top. We don't start at the bottom and come up and around and this way. But I do think it's an excellent question, because when I say we don't do that, when I taught in Chesterfield County, when my children went to school, that was the way it was taught there. But I am curious to know, so please feel free to inform me if that is, because if that's interesting, I hadn't thought of that. I'm wondering if writing fluency is now something that maybe is approached differently. Like I said, when I was teaching and when my children were learning, there were letters that we didn't stop in the middle of, but we didn't start the R at the bottom and go around. But I don't know, I'm curious. So if you would like to inform me, that's great. I'm going to check on that though with our developers to see what they learned from research on writing fluency when they were putting this together. Because all of this is research based, and I am curious about that. So good question. I don't know.
Circle the words that start with the letter R.
So the one you have starts the R at the top. Oh, I see where you're saying goes down and back up. Yeah, I have seen that. Interesting. Huh. I'll ask our I'll ask our developers. Evidently, they probably looked at several, I'm going to guess here, so just know this is a guess. They probably looked at several different writing programs and decided the one that was most commonly used. And I did mention we have our international folks on, so we sell across the globe our product, and our product is used for children learning English, etc., in other countries. But I'm wondering about that, and I'm curious, so I will look into that a little bit and see. Let's see what this says. Okay, good. All right, fantastic. I'm glad you brought that up, Jill, because I hadn't thought of it, and I'm wondering if we should have maybe two choices or three. I don't know, but again, we probably looked at all of the different programs and selected what is most commonly used. But I'm now you've got my curiosity going. All right, so again, the beautiful thing here is kids can practice without the teacher. So again, I got that a little loud, don't I? Sorry about that. Let me turn that down just a little bit. So I'm asked to circle, and if I get it right, I get immediate feedback. If I get it wrong, I also get immediate feedback, which is funny.
This is the letter R. Let's practice reading some words that begin.
I'm going to move forward for the sake of time. You can see that there's various activities there, and I'm going to finish the book. I'm going to get points and be told that I did a great job. So immediate feedback. Of course, if I'm not a reader yet, my teacher will see it and tell me. Again, across the top here, this banner is books that are new, etc. I'm just going to pick one so that I can show you. If I were, let's say that I was learning a specific letter combination, or, let's say it was a specific beginning sound or ending blend or whatever, I can pick books accordingly. Again, kids don't have a million controls on here to make it so distracting, but they can turn the volume up and down, and they can also enlarge the screen as it's being read. They can also read independently without audio, or they can hear it read by authentic voiceover
Whose Eyes Are These? By Joanne Randolph. Whose sharp orange eyes help it hunt? This owl's sharp orange eyes help it hunt. Whose green eyes are really made up of lots of small eyes? A praying mantis has green eyes made up of lots of small eyes.
Okay, so if I did need it bigger,
big cat's eyes are set in a striped face?
And you also see that it's highlighting the words as
it's
being read. Now, I'm not going to go further into the books. Obviously, if I was learning R, I could do Rocky's Road Trip. There's a lot of other ones, but I just want to give you that. Kids are also able to save books for later that they want to read by just either selecting them from the carousels that are on their home screen, their recommended books, or they can search. So if I were to search, I'm able to actually look at books here that are, yeah, there we go. I can actually look at books here that may or may not be within my reading level. But again, if I'm being asked to read for pleasure, I can certainly do that. We have books in English. There's 2,400 books, and we're adding books all the time. There are books in English and Spanish. So if I were to go into this book, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, let me just go ahead and just show you. This book is in Spanish. Some of the ones in Spanish have audio, some do not. The books that are bilingual books do not have audio, but some of the Spanish books have audio, and most of the English books have audio as well. All right. But if I were to say, you know, I love this book and I want to read it later as a student, I can just click it here and it goes into my favorites. So I'm able to collect books for later. I'm also able to look at how am I doing? You know, this is how many stars I've earned, and I earn them through spending time. It's not necessarily just doing well on my reading, but it's also spending time in the program. And then I have Level Up Land. This is my motivation for, you know, helping me. I'm allowed to spend those coins that I just earned and go into a virtual reality game, which is really awesome. And I can look at that and add the more points that I have. I can go to the store. I can buy different characters. The characters do different things. I might be a real superstar in the game, but not necessarily fantastic at reading yet. But I have a way to really, well, my X is under my, I have a way to be a superstar in my classroom by spending a lot of time trying and practicing. All right. So, and then when I do that, I can have the coolest virtual reality, and I can buy different backgrounds and all of that. So I'm getting some positive feedback and positive reinforcement for trying and for learning my phonics, etc. Oh, I see where got it. All right. Okay. Let's turn that off. Okay, so I'm gonna go. Sorry about that. All right. So now I'm going to get out of here. You see, that's really it for students, which is cool. They don't have a lot of distractions here, so they are able to really concentrate on the task at hand. Some of the programs I've seen are a little bit scary in that there's so many buttons and bells. It's like they put everything that every potential customer asks for in there. And then what's happened now is they have realistically so much that it's distracting, especially for our children who are dyslexic or have learning disabilities or are struggling readers. I'm in as a teacher now, and you'll notice that truthfully, my interface looks very much the same. I have that banner, I have the books I've started, I have books that I've assigned to my students, I have my phonics, and then I can see books that are popular with my kids as well as other carousels based on different categories. You notice I have a search feature here that's not unlike the search feature you saw with Jameer, but I have a sub menu here that allows me now, if I look at the books, specific books, I'm able to filter those books. Maybe I want to filter by certain standards, and I'm able to do that. Maybe I want to filter by audio length or page count. I may want to say I want to find books about dogs in a specific lexile range, or I'm just looking for fiction or nonfiction, or just books that are in Spanish, okay? And maybe I'm looking for books about all animals, you know, so I can get different ones depending on what I'm searching for. All right. So once I do that, I'm able to filter further, but I still have the same kind of search. Once I do that, I may save books into my collection. And if I do that, I'm also able to tag books. So I could use a tag for multiple things depending upon, you know, what it is that I am teaching. So this book right here, I may use when I'm teaching the color yellow, but I could also use it when I'm teaching compound words. So if I wanted to create a tag for compound words, I could. If I'm teaching about the White House and I have students who are maybe reading in Spanish, maybe not, but I have a book that I could give them that has both the English and Spanish, a bilingual book. I have a book on that same topic that's a much higher. This may be a read aloud that I'm giving, and books that are in between. So I can find books on the same topics in various Lexile levels, fiction and nonfiction, and I can save those to my collection, and I can tag books in my collection so that I am able to use them and find them quickly. All right, so I don't have to just find books and use them right then. These are part of our SEL, our social and emotional books. You can see there's a wide variety and a lot of different topics and Lexile levels as well. So almost any topic you can think of, and these are just the ones I've saved. I mean, this is nowhere close to all the books that we have. Okay, I think I just dismissed that. Go ahead and clear that. All right, when I go into my classroom, here are the kids of my class. I can see, not unlike a typical class, I have kids reading at different Lexile levels. I can decide, now remember, I said that you have an initial intake and you have a progress monitoring every 2 weeks if kids are reading and they've read within that zone 5 books or they've read 2.5 hours. If you feel that those aren't accurate because kids have either clicked through, they're dying to get to the next book, or they don't like to test. I mean, they're very short after the first initial intake. But they just click through because they're dying to get to the next book in the series. You can re-trigger that as a teacher. So a teacher has control to say, we're clearing the slate, starting all over, or just let's do a temperature read on the whole class if I want to, or on individual students. So I can do that. I cannot turn those off, however. They are part of the progress monitoring built in and that automatic assignment of books. What you can, as a teacher, turn off and on are quizzes. There are quizzes that are tied to the book. So that progress monitoring is really about reading growth in general, not necessarily the book. The quizzes are after each book, and the teacher can either turn them on, I want them never. I love to read, but I don't want to test after every book. I'm really fostering that love of reading. I'm doing the assessment on whether they comprehended everything I assigned on volcanoes in my room later. We don't need a quiz. Or I could say after every 2 books, every 5 books. I'm actually also able to add a constructive response. You can see here, I have Jack reading on this level, and I'm saying for him, I would like him to do constructive response. And I can see books that are assigned. I can also see constructive responses that Jack has answered. So this was the question. These are the skills that question is aligned to, the standards. This happens to be Common Core. If I was in Texas, it would be the TEKS. If I was in Virginia, it'd be the SOLs. But this is how he answered, and I decide, does it meet or not meet? So that gives me a quick and easy way as a teacher to be able to go in and do that. I can also create groups here, put students in groups, and assign to groups. Also, I can control game access. I go here, decide, put in what hours I want to say. These are the precious hours of class where I am going to control the game access. Outside of this, they can use it whenever they want to. So I don't necessarily have to make those parameters the actual time in my class, but these are the times when I want to control. So from 8 to 3:15 or 8:30 to 3:15, this is where I'm going to say I'm controlling the game access. If we get to school at 7:30, they have an hour of unlimited use. If we don't leave till 4, they have 45 minutes of unlimited use. If we go to school from Monday to Thursday, they have unlimited use when they're not in school. If we don't, and they are in school on Friday, they have unlimited use on Friday in this configuration. All I have to do is change Thursday to Friday if I want to be able to control that as well. So I set that up, and then once I do it, I'm able to set the parameters, either unlimited or how much time during what I said was that precious time, how much time they can use the game. So I have that full control as a teacher. I also have very good data. It's not overwhelming data. It's data that I can use. I have 3 students. This is a mock class, obviously, but you can see that I can look, I can see immediately top skills and bottom skills. The skills and standards are broken up. So I'm able to say, you know what, this is one that was wrong, and one, you know, so they've only, I'm sorry, 0 that were correct out of 1 attempted. That's not enough data to tell me anything. But if I go to where he's taken enough and answered enough, I can begin to get data that is reliable and valid, and see maybe I need to go find a book that he's interested in that is suggested for teaching something specific that I feel we need to work on. So if I'm saying, you know, recall is one of those things, I can certainly find a book that's aligned, that gives me good questions in the quiz on that to help me help him. The other thing I can do here is I'm able to drill further in. I can see where kids started, where they are now, as well as, you know, the full activity breakdown, etc. I'm just going to really quickly, for the sake of time, go in as an admin so that you can see what this looks like on a higher level. If you're going in and you're looking at this, again, as district, I've only got, you know, 3 or 4 schools, but you can see here that I can look, I can even filter by school if I want to, and just look at the data for that particular school. Or maybe there's 2 schools that are dual immersion, something like that, that I want to take a look at. I can do that, okay? The other thing that I can do here is I can look at, you know, just based on the books that were read that are Spanish or bilingual, I can look at a specific grade level. I can look at specific date ranges. And from this vantage point, I can drill in and get into classes and all the way to student data. So this student has only taken the intake. They haven't done anything past that. So you can see that this is minimal. But, you know, if it wasn't a demo site, obviously you would see that there would be more data there. So I am able, on the district level, to go from a big, very clear view of how each of my schools are doing into looking at what each of the classes are doing within that school, and then from there into the students in the class. Obviously, we wouldn't have, you know, we'd have a few more classes and students at the district level. All right. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint just to sort of make sure that we wrap this up on time. Again, integrate it into the reading, have a huge assortment of interactive independent practice and reading resources, building that culture of literacy by making sure that kids are able to do the practice of the lessons that they just learned in their phonics work. Not in isolation, but woven within. And then again, these were our learning outcomes. So I'll just pause for a minute. We're a little bit over, but I do thank you for being with us. I appreciate your interest in the program. Jill, it was very nice chatting with you. I know you're in North Canton Elementary, so if you are interested in learning more, let me know. I'll go to the next screen so that everyone can see that I do have my contact information here. Feel free to jot that down. It's Carol with an E .crawford@rosenpub.com. So feel free to email me if you need more information, if you have additional questions, or if you would like to learn more about the cost or how we do PD, all of that. I'm sure your rep in your area would be glad to help you out with those questions. So thank you again. It's been my pleasure. Have a great day.